Hi folks, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for clicking on the video as always. As you probably guessed already, I am out for a hot tent. I'm out in the One Tigris smoky hut, and I've got the Pomoli wood stove. To be honest, it's a little bit early for hot tent camps. As some of you may know, it doesn't really get that cold in Scotland anyway. It's the last weekend of October, so although we're well into autumn, it's actually quite mild at the moment. It's about 12 degrees. But it is supposed to drop down to kind of 4 or 5 tonight. It's going to be very windy and very wet as well, so it might feel a bit chilly. I can always control the fire and let it die down. You know, it doesn't have to be too hot in here. But I haven't been out for a while, so I just fancy doing something a bit fun. Last week we were probably starting to hit that peak colour in terms of leaves, but we had our first named storm, and I can't even remember what the name of it was now. But some pretty strong winds and pretty strong gusts, and most of the leaves are off the trees now. I'm just in my local forest, but I actually came to this specific spot because it's in a little group of birch. I was hoping to be sitting under a load of golden leaved birch. There's a few sort of ones that are sheltered that still have leaves on, but most of the leaves are on the ground now. According to the forecast, from 2 o'clock onwards, the weather's going to start to deteriorate pretty quickly. Pretty heavy rain all afternoon, quite breezy for the whole weekend, to be honest. So I just got in here, set up the shelter, so at least if it starts, you know, chucking it down, we've got a bit of cover. Right, that weather's starting to come in pretty quick now. It's completely clouded over in the space of 20 minutes. The wind's picking up too. It doesn't look like the rain's far away. I can see kind of southwest from here down Loch Ness. That's the prevailing wind. That's where the weather's blowing in from. I just had a quick scout around for some firewood. There's a little pocket of lodgepole pine just down in front of me here. It's been planted in a wet hollow, so most of them are dead. So there's lots of kind of small, dry, standing dead ones, and just push them down. Don't even have to cut them, so that's handy. I'm not going to do the bulk of the firewood just now. I'm just going to cut up one of these smaller ones just to get the stove on, just have some coffee and a bit of lunch, and then I'll do sort of proper firewood processing after I've had something to eat. This pine wasn't great in the end. You can see it's kind of rotten on the outside, or punky as they say in North America. You can see, you know, the wood's dry in the middle there, but that kind of outer, I don't know, a centimetre or so is fairly well gone. Yeah, it's pretty miserable now. As you can probably hear, the rain's pretty heavy now. It's been going like this for the last 2.5, 3 hours. So we finally got a break in the rain. The clocks actually go back tonight, but at the moment it's getting dark about 6:30, maybe 6:45, like properly dark. So yeah, like I say, it's 6 o'clock now. So yeah, half hour, 40 minutes is going to be pretty dark. Right, let's tuck in. I'm looking forward to this. So I'm just going to chat a little bit whilst I'm eating this. I know it's been a while since I put a video on the channel, but I actually was out in September and I had a really good video planned, one that I've been planning for a long time. It was to go over to D-side, on the east side of the Cairngorms National Park, and I was going to visit the kind of 4 main pine woods, so Glenferrick, Ballochbuie, Glen Tanner and Mar Lodge. And I went across, I spent the whole week, I recorded the whole thing, I did forest thoughts for all 4 forests. I had a camping trip, one night camping thrown in with that as well. I was staying in the van most of the week. The weather was absolutely incredible. A couple of frosty mornings, but really warm, sunny days. Everything perfect. And I got round all 4 all 4 pine woods, well, 3.5. I got all the way to the Friday, and I was visiting Mar Lodge on the Friday before I went home that night. And I crashed my drone. And it's about 6 weeks later and my drone is still sitting in a big granny pine in the middle of Mar Lodge estate. I couldn't get it back. I'll give more details about the whole story, hopefully in a I still want to put a video together for that trip, but I filmed a hell of a lot of drone footage to back up a lot of the points and observations I was making about the pine woods. So without the drone footage, it really is kind of half a video for me, and it really frustrated me and really annoyed me, and I just haven't got around to editing a video, and it kind of put me off making a video for the last few weeks. I just didn't have the motivation for it. But yeah, hopefully I can still put something together, because it was a really great trip. Me and Darach spent the night out in one of the pine woods at Ballochbuie, and that was such a nice corner, really beautiful summer evening as well. So yeah, I really do want to put something out. I've looked at replacing it, maybe upgrading to the mini 4 Pro, Mini Pro 4, whatever it is. It's just a lot of money, so I'm not sure. I really enjoy having the drone. I feel like it gives the videos, especially when I'm talking about a landscape, you know, that added perspective. So I really would like to get something again, but we'll see. It's 10 o'clock. The temperature is down to about 5 or 6 degrees, so the forecast has been pretty accurate for today. Getting pretty late now, and we're going to head to bed, and we will see you in the morning. Morning, folks. Quite a nice morning. It dipped down to about, well, it was 3 degrees when I woke up, so it's just feeling a bit damp and chilly. There's a bit of light rain early this morning as well. It's well, it's 7:45 now. Just gonna finish this coffee, and I'm gonna cook up some breakfast. I've just got a couple of eggs and sausages, and you should know by now that there's never anything new or exciting in terms of food on this channel. Just getting packed up here, ready to head out. I'm actually heading to Fort William tonight. I'm going to be spending the next couple of days there attending a very important conference on Scotland's pine woods. First conference solely focusing on pine woods in pretty much 30 years. I think the last one was in 1994 in Inverness, so obviously things have moved on quite a bit from then. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the camping part of the video. As always, if you want to stick around for Forest Thoughts, please do. It's just a very simple, easy, seasonal one for this trip. I'm just going to be talking about why leaves fall and the process behind it. So if that interests you, please stick around. But if not, I will see you on the next one. Hi folks. Thanks for sticking around for Forest Thoughts as always. We are well into the autumn season now, or we certainly will be when this video goes out. And as you all know, this season very much is symbolised by the leaves changing their colours and then falling off the trees. And this is especially so in kind of northern temperate forests in the boreal region. And the species that do drop their leaves at this time of year are known as deciduous. And the word deciduous comes from Latin and literally means falling off or falling down. The word autumn itself is also from Latin and means to fall. And that's what the season is more commonly known as in places like North America. So why do trees drop their leaves and what's really going on? Well, the process itself is known as abscission. And surprise, surprise, that comes from Latin, and this time it simply means to cut off. And the process of abscission happens in roughly 5 stages, which involve various kind of biochemical and hormonal changes in the tree, and I'll go through those just now. The first stage is triggered by changes in temperature and day length, or photoperiod as it's also known. As it gets cooler and the days shorten, the tree detects these changes and it starts to change the levels of 2 different hormones, auxin and ethylene. Now auxin is important for maintaining the cells that keep the leaf attached throughout the growing season, and ethylene is used to promote the process of abscission itself. So oxygen levels come down and ethylene levels go up. Second stage is for the tree to start forming that zone where abscission is going to take place, and that's at the bottom of the leaf stem where it's connected to the tree. And as those levels of oxygen and ethylene start to change, enzymes then start to break down the cells in that area, and it creates what's called a separation layer, which is essentially a layer of kind of more fragile and weaker cells. The third stage is what we're all most familiar with, and that's when the tree starts to retrieve nutrients such as nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium and magnesium from the leaves before they fall on the ground, and it stores them in other parts of the tree, and it will use them for the next growing season. We now also start to see the chlorophyll in the leaves start to break down, and if you're not sure what chlorophyll is, it's what gives leaves that green colour. And if you think back to kind of school science days, it's kind of vitally important for the leaves to carry out photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is the process whereby the tree is able to process the energy it's getting from the sun and turns it into sugars and food for the tree. As that chlorophyll or the green colour starts to break down, that's when the leaf starts to reveal other pigments that are in the leaf, and we start to see the kind of reds and the oranges and the yellows coming out that we're familiar with. The fourth stage is where the tree creates a protective layer at the bottom of that abscission zone that we just talked about, and the main reason for that is to stop any bacteria or fungi or insects getting in to the tree after the leaf is dropped, but also to stop any water escaping from the tree itself. The fifth and final stage is for the leaf to actually detach from the tree. So once that separation layer, that layer of cells is weak enough and the protective layer behind it is fully formed, then it's safe enough for the leaf to just drop away from the tree. And that usually just happens through gravity, of course. You know, things like strong winds will speed up that process as well. And essentially the tree's left with a little scar, but the hole is kind of fully sealed shut, and the tree is protected from anything getting inside or water escaping. So that's really how it happens. But why does it happen? Well, essentially it's a survival strategy that deciduous species have evolved to cope with the changing seasons, especially in kind of temperate zones where you get really cold seasons or really dry seasons. One of the primary drivers for them doing it is to conserve water. So trees will transpire through their leaves, and they have, you know, tiny pores on the surface of that leaf which they lose water vapor through, and if more water is going out of the system than coming in, that's when a tree, you know, really starts to struggle. And this could happen in a dry season for obvious reasons, but it could also happen when it's cold too, because if the ground is frozen, then the tree roots can't access the water that's available in the ground. So the easiest option for the tree, and to reduce risk of water loss, is to basically just drop all of its leaves. Another very important reason is nutrient recycling, and as we talked about earlier, the tree is able to reabsorb important nutrients back into the tree and store them for the next growing season in the spring. And this is especially important in kind of poorer growing conditions where you know, a lot of these kind of important nutrients are not always readily available in kind of larger amounts. Third reason is for the tree to avoid any physical damage. So a tree that is full of leaves going into a season with potentially you know, heavy loads of snow or strong winds is going to be at risk, because it's more likely to accumulate and hold on to heavy loads of snow, or if it's, you know, in full leaf, it's going to act like a sail in the wind. And obviously both of those scenarios, potentially the tree could end up damaged or even, you know, blown over completely. And the final reason I'm going to mention is pests and diseases. So that the tree dropping its leaves every year kind of acts like an annual cleanse. If there are kind of pathogens or fungi or, you know, the eggs of insects in the foliage, then they can drop these and kind of reduce the risk of infection. Now obviously if a lot of these things are already in the main body of the tree, then it's too late, but it could still help to reduce overall populations and risks to other trees around it. Now, as a bonus, all these fallen leaves then decompose, which then enriches the soil and improves the growing conditions for new trees and other vegetation. And this is especially important in pioneer species like birch and aspen, which are often the first trees to make it into a new area, you know, to colonize a new area. And they are basically improving that soil as they go by dropping their leaves every year. And that really is an important component of that process of, you know, ecological succession that we've talked about in the past, that allows basically, you know, almost bare rock environments to eventually transform into kind of, you know, nutrient rich, fairly complex, you know, high forest. And that's pretty much it. You know, in the main, it's a survival strategy. You know, dropping those leaves every year helps to reduce risk and improve the chances of the tree, you know, making it through the winter to the next growing season. And obviously a different survival strategy is going down the evergreen route. And the evergreen route covers most coniferous species, you know, like spruces, pines, firs, you know, cedars as well. And obviously they have to deal with the same issues, really. They've just evolved a different way to cope with the things that we just talked about. Conifers tend to grow in areas with poor growing conditions, and that could be influenced by latitude or altitude, but essentially it means poorer soils, harsher weather, and shorter growing seasons. Whereas broadleaves almost have an on or an off strategy in terms of growth, conifers tend to have a slow and steady strategy. And if you keep that in mind, I'll go through some of those main issues that they have to deal with again. Water conservation is the big one again, and to cope with that, conifers have evolved a needle shaped leaf rather than, you know, a broad leaf, and that has several advantages. There's much less surface area. The needle's usually a tougher leaf with a sort of waxy coating, and conifers, the pores that I mentioned earlier that trees lose water vapor through, they're actually sunken in on the surface of a needle. And all of these things together help to sort of reduce that risk of water loss. If we go back to that thought of kind of slow and steady, another big advantage of being evergreen, you know, having your leaves all year round, is that the tree can start to photosynthesize basically whenever the conditions allow. You know, it's not limited to that just main growing season. If you have a warm day in winter where the conditions are favourable, you know, then the tree can start that process again. And the big benefit to that is, you know, if by not dropping all of their leaves, they don't have to invest a lot of energy in growing new leaves at the start of the next growing season in the spring. And again, that's another big advantage in areas where nutrients are really scarce in the first place. And moving on from that, although conifers are evergreen, they don't hold on to those same needles for, you know, the full duration of their lives. They usually hold on to needles for, depending on the species, anywhere between 5 and 10 years. So they could have needles that are up to 10 years old. But again, by not renewing all those leaves every year, it's a lot less demanding on certain nutrients like nitrogen or phosphorus that are very hard to access or almost non-existent in some of these poorer, growing environments. Lastly, again, the physical damage. So although it's holding on to its needles, the needles are very thin and narrow. Obviously there's not much surface area, so it's less likely to hold on to heavy loads of kind of frost or snow. It's more likely to shed those off. Also, that smaller surface area and the tougher waxy coating on the needles reduces the risk of actual frost damage to cells in the leaves. So as I said, it's a survival strategy, but it's a different one. But the evergreen trees and the deciduous trees are essentially, they found different ways to combat the same issues. But of course, in nature, there's always an exception to the rule, and one of those exceptions is species of trees in the genus Larix, or larches as they're more commonly known. And to confuse things a little bit, larches are known as deciduous conifers. And essentially what they've done is employ sort of both strategies, I guess, to cope with some of the more extreme conditions that they would be growing in naturally. Now, larches are some of the highest growing trees in terms of elevation, but they're also the most northerly growing tree in terms of latitude. Now, if you go to, say, the Canadian Rockies, you'll find larch trees growing, right up to 3,000 meters above sea level. But also, there's a species of larch, the Hurrian larch, I think that's how you say it, actually forms the most northerly forest, and that is in the far north of Russia. So a lot of the species in this genus Larix are growing in some of the most extreme conditions that trees can physically grow. The conditions in some of these areas that these trees are growing are so poor, even during the growing season, that they've adopted that coniferous strategy of slow and steady. But the winters are so extreme, you're talking, they could be getting down to minus 60 or minus 70 Celsius, especially in the most northerly forests in Russia, that there's still too much risk of kind of water loss or frost damage to the tree. So they then essentially drop all their needles, just like a deciduous tree would do. Now, in Scotland and the wider UK, we actually do have quite a bit of larch, but unfortunately none of it is actually native here. A lot of it was brought in and planted as a commercial timber species. But if you live here or you've spent time here, you've probably noticed kind of golden yellow bands of conifers in the forest at this time of year. And part of the reason you'll see larch in sort of lines more than full blocks is that they were often planted as fire breaks. Larch are naturally quite resistant to fire, so they would plant larch around the boundary, to protect a crop or between species, that kind of thing. And that's it for this video. I hope you found that interesting. Thanks for sticking around as always, and hopefully I will see you on the next one.